Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. There are a lot of really great reasons not to trade Austin Reaves. Are the Lakers focused on a really bad reason not to trade him? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how, where you get your podcasts. This one's always going to be free for you, never locked behind some sort of really tall paywall or something like that. Locked On Lakers on YouTube. So we can hang out with 35,000 plus subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are getting deep into their machinations. They're playing on the trade machine. They're doing all kinds of stuff, figure out how the Lakers can improve, and the Austin Reaves conversations seem to be only heating up. Plus, Andy, a new center on the center target list. Is this maybe better than somebody the Lakers have already, the guys have already been talked about? We will get into that soon. But first, Dan Woike, in his newsletter that he puts out from the LA Times, covers the Lakers there, does a great job. He had a really interesting newsletter where he was talking about Austin Reaves and just how live these Reaves trade rumors really are. Like, is there anything to them? Are the Lakers still considering him kind of untouchable? Is he available for the right price? What's going on here? And it was a good piece. Had a lot of clarity in here in terms of setting the table for what could come this summer.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different places we can go to with this. I guess we should start with what the Lakers would be looking for to begin with if they did trade Austin, and also what type of offer or what type of player it would need to be. And this reading from Dan's piece, he is not viewed, he being Austin, as, quote, untradeable, because, and I think he means more untouchable as opposed to untradeable, or untradeable from the Lakers' perspective.
Right, like off the table.
Right, as in we will not trade him, as opposed to, say, Russell Westbrook a few years when it felt like he is untradeable. Or let's say Paul George right now feels pretty untradeable.
Yeah.
But because almost no one in the NBA is untradeable. But if the Lakers are going to trade him for a center, they're going to want one that is foundationally important, a build-around type, and not a fill-in towards the obvious need they have at center and will need to address in other ways. If one of the best centers in the NBA were available, the conversations might be different, but at least now, during the first part of that offseason, that just isn't the case. So obviously it is not set in stone that Austin can only be traded for a center. And unless it is a center, they will refuse to move Austin. But it does speak to how, we've talked about this a lot, the standards for moving Austin appear to be very high. And as we will get into, there are reasons for that I think are completely valid, and reasons for that where I wonder if the Lakers are hanging on too tightly to Austin.
Yeah,
and for the right reasons.
We'll get into that. I mean, I think the baseline here is sort of what we have talked about. Neither one of us, I'm not in a hurry to trade Reaves. I think I am absolutely 100% do not think the playoffs exposed Reaves or, made it clear that he can't be a playoff performer, or that he's not the kind of player who you can rely on in a postseason setting. I think there are, the playoffs are incredibly hard. Mm-hmm. Most players, even really, really good ones, get worse. Some of them, even significantly so in the playoffs. It is very rare to be a guy who elevates, or even honestly, if you're a star player in the NBA, performs at exactly the same levels you do in the regular season.
That's one of the things that made guys like LeBron and Kobe and some of the other like true all-time greats so great. It's not just that they were great players, it's that their level of play in the playoffs would at minimum stay consistent, if not actually go up.
Right. And even Kobe, like, if things go slightly differently in that game 7 in 2010, like, even Kobe, the legacy and the damage to his reputation, all that, because of how he performed, from a shooting standpoint,
Kobe had
in that game 7.
He had a terrible 2004 finals against the Pistons.
Nikola Jokic has had some phenomenal games in this series against Oklahoma City. I think he's clearly the best player in the world, and I don't even think it's really up for debate. But he's also had a couple clunkers, especially by his standards. I mean, a Nikola Jokic clunker is still a pretty good game for most people.
No, but he has not been nearly as effective as Denver needs him to be. And the point I was getting to with Kobe is just a series like 2004 against the Pistons stands out so much, not even just because of the stakes involved, it was the finals, but also because Kobe, for so much of his playoff career, was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
So you remember a lot of times, sometimes you remember the times where he wasn't as good more than the times where he was.
Yeah. I think that's true for a lot of guys. If you ask people to name LeBron performances in the playoffs, you're going to get a lot of, the comeback against Golden State. And then you're going to get a lot of, wow, he really wasn't very good against the Mavericks that one time. But I think, look at Julius Randle this year for Minnesota. The level of play that he's had that has been kind of a 180 from his playoff reputation. And for guys, especially guys in that very, very good player, which is what Randall is and what I think Reaves is, not a superstar, but really, really good. That variance can be even higher, and so my point is, I don't buy the idea that Austin Reaves can never be, he's never going to be good in the playoffs. He was bad this year. Don't know how injured he was. Don't know how much of the matchup was. To some degree, he obviously needs to get better, but I'm not off that train. But that said, like, the idea that you can't trade him but like the Lakers seem to have this right, where if you're going to trade him, you use that asset to acquire somebody who is as good as Austin Reaves at a position of greater need. And that's why everybody's focusing on center. If you can find the Austin Reaves of centers, the LeBron James of feet, if you can find the Austin Reaves of centers, that is a discussion that you have to have in the front office, because your need at center is so dire at this point. You can probably replace some of the things that Reaves gives you in terms of secondary scoring, in terms of playmaking and things like that. You've got to fill that hole in the middle of your lineup.
I agree with you that Austin was not, quote unquote, exposed during the playoffs. And he has, in, I think it's 3 playoff runs now, he's had a lot of very good series. That being said, though, and this is something that I do think the Lakers just need to consider in general as they evaluate all their needs, even if they're keeping Austin. The playoffs didn't so much expose Austin because they just reinforced the weaknesses that we knew about anyway. Like, you didn't watch Austin in these playoffs and the struggles that he had and think, wow, that's new. What it really was is the things that you've been concerned about with Austin before. How does he match up against, a slew of athletic wings, like the type of players that have given him trouble before, like the outside shooting with Austin can run very hot and cold. Like, what does it mean over the course of a series when you're talking about a player that by NBA standards is not super athletic, he's not super strong, he's not super fast? These are all things you knew about Austin anyway. So in that sense, I agree with you that he was not exposed because there wasn't so much anything new learned about Austin as it was almost the sum of all fears coming together in one really ugly series.
Sure. And if you change like most things, if you change some of the ingredients around it, different players, you have a viable center, you have different wing, whatever it might be, some of the results can be different. And we can debate over the course of the summer how much you need to change. But I just, context can matter a lot.
Sure.
And if Reaves was missing wide open shots that had nothing to do with what Minnesota was doing.
I disagree with that. I think the series put him a lot on tilt and got in.
I still think
bothered.
Not by I don't think he looked bothered standing alone shooting 3-pointers.
No, but you can be bothered, and it leads to missing those shots because you're frustrated by what's going on. I just strongly disagree with that.
I understand that. But all of that said, whether you think Austin was exposed or not, whether you think he's a viable NBA playoff player or not in terms of the level that you would need, there is one aspect of the Austin Reaves, why the Lakers really love him story that the Lakers shouldn't cling to. And we'll tell you about that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by PrizePicks. Basketball season is at its peak. The playoffs are getting down to the nitty gritty, and now is the time to put your sports knowledge to work with PrizePicks, the top platform for daily fantasy sports. PrizePicks makes it easy. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and you're in. Whether you're talking about stats like points or rebounds or assists, you've got a shot to win up to 2,000 times your entry. The app takes less than 60 seconds to use, and I love that you can mix and match basketball players with other sports like baseball and esports in the same lineup. Just keep things interesting, weird, and fun. And as you hit your picks, the payouts, they come back fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. Tuesdays are even better with Taco Tuesdays. LeBron loves that, where player projections discounted up to 25% more for even more value. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
So it is well known, Andy, that the Lakers take an enormous amount of pride and joy in not just the development of Austin Reaves, but kind of the story of Austin Reaves, undrafted free agent, developed through their G League team, and so on, and has progressed from a guy who on a 2-way contract to somebody who is kind of a fringy all-star caliber dude. Dan's story, his newsletter that we were referencing the first segment, does seem to imply, though, that that's part of the reason that the Lakers might be reluctant to trade him. They just love the Austin Reaves story. They think it's very appealing for the fan base. They like it on a personal level because it kind of validates them. There are, I don't know, dozens of really good reasons not to trade Austin Reaves. That's probably the worst one.
It's not a good reason, and it is something that I have heard many times over the years, that they are almost clinging to this story, like not just because it represents a feather in their cap, but because there becomes sentimentality behind it. And look, it is a legitimately fantastic story. Like, undrafted to where Austin is right now, somebody who had to transfer colleges before. Austin is, we've both been around him, a very likable guy. He is extremely well liked in that locker room. He is very respected in that locker room because he works his ass off. And he is also a very accountable guy. Like, Austin is somebody that you would look for a lot of his characteristics in a player. And that story is fantastic. But the Lakers, as a franchise that I think loves both storytelling and mythology and perpetuating that stuff, it can lead into problems, whether you're talking about, sometimes we've talked about this before, how they run the organization. And I think sometimes they are trapped by their own mythology, but also because it can lead to roster decisions that aren't good. Like, for example, I don't think Rob Pelinka several years ago only kept Talen Horton-Tucker over Alex Caruso because he saw THT as, finger quotes, his discovery, as opposed to Alex Caruso, who was the player that cultivated under his watch rather than starting there. For people who don't remember, Alex began in the G League system for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And There are other factors in play here, including, I have no doubt, the clutch factor with TNT being a clutch client and the dynamics, particularly that were going on then. But I have heard from multiple people over the years that Rob Pelinka did overvalue THT in part because he was excited at the idea of THT being one of his guys. And that's bad process. It's bad priorities, but it's also, I think, missing a larger point. Alex Caruso was a victory lap for the Lakers. Like, they essentially plucked this guy out of NBA obscurity. You know, he was a fringe NBA player at best, and he turned into an all defensive caliber player under his watch. And unless you're like a true NBA geek or the biggest fan of whatever the hell OKC's G League affiliate is called, like, that's a win for the Lakers because Alex Caruso is seen as a Laker. And also, Reaves is a win for the organization, for Rob, whether he fosters Austin Reaves as a Laker lifer or if he can flip him for a player that fills more immediate needs. Like, it's not a linear thing. And I think they need to be careful of being mindful of that. Like, you will still get credit. You will still be remembered for this regardless. But if you don't end up getting better along the way, it doesn't matter. It's just like a heartwarming story. Laker fans aren't here for just purely heartwarming.
That's where I was going to go with it. It's like, even if you're willing to say, like, it's too cynical to be like, they're looking for the victory lap. They're looking for the credit. They're, you know, the flip side of that is, the other part of the appeal is fans really love Austin Reaves for reasons that are really easy to see. But the goal here is to win, and you have to be really careful about being overly sentimental. There are certain guys that maybe the bar should be a little bit higher to trade, you know, or certain guys that, you know, are so much part of the Lakers weren't in even when he demanded it, they sort of ignored him. You know, we're going to try really hard not to trade Kobe. The Mavs weren't going to trade Dirk without Dirk saying, trade me. You know, at the very least, you know, the Lakers weren't going to be the team that offered up Kobe. If Kobe demands it, they, you know, maybe it happens.
I mean, early in his time coaching the team, Phil Jackson tried to get the team to trade Kobe. I want to say for Jason Kidd and Sean Marion, and the organization said no.
Right. You know, so I mean, generally speaking, there are certain guys who, unless they demand it, you know, Bucks aren't going to trade Giannis unless Giannis says trade me. And so, like, there are certain guys. Reaves isn't that, you know, for Lakers fans. And so,
I mean, the Lakers spent 3 years shopping Pau Gasol, and like, respectfully to Austin, he ain't Pau.
The what you have to, you know, so like what Lakers fans certainly don't want them to do is include Austin in a panicky deal, in a bad trade or whatever. But like, if you turn around and convert Reaves into a player that, you know, they feel and you can realistically say fits in the Luka era in a better way, then that's going to be okay. Like, that will be just fine. You know, the Lakers fans want to win. Ultimately, the goal here is winning. And
there's only one exception I can think of in my entire time, either covering this team or being a Laker fan, like fanatically obsessing over everything going on with this team. There's only one exception to that, and that was Eddie Jones. When they traded Eddie Jones, Laker fans...
People are still mad about
Yes, they are. And it should be reminded, they ended up winning anyway. Right. Like, they won titles very soon after, and Laker fans still pissed off about Eddie Jones.
Along those lines, Michael Scotto at... where is he these days? At Hoops Hype, yes, thank you. I'm looking at my notes, and I did not write that down. He is reporting that one of the names that could end up on the market if he's not able to get an extension with the Toronto Raptors is their starting center, Jakob Poeltl. That is a different name and a better name than a lot of the names that have been tossed around, you know, whether you're talking about Nick Claxton and Daniel Gafford, who are probably at the head of the class for this. Adding somebody like Jakob Poeltl could be intriguing to teams that need centers, including the Lakers. Now, without getting into some of the salary cap mechanics and how you do this and sign and trades or what an extension would look like and all that other stuff, I want to talk about next whether or not Poeltl is the kind of guy who meets the Austin Reaves of centers standard that I was just talking about earlier in this segment. Is he the kind of guy? He's not a rock star. He's not he's not somebody who's not going to the Hall of Fame, but he's really good. Is he good enough that you would make a trade or something like that to bring him over here if it cost you Reaves? That's next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by GameTime. There is nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, fans losing their minds. It's the type of atmosphere you got to experience it live. Like, trust me, Brian and I have been to many, many playoff games in person. You want to see that. This year's matchups have been phenomenal. If you want in, GameTime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff game. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off. They got killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, no surprise fees. I love that I can see the exact view. Again, panoramic seat views, and you see exactly the view before you buy. There's no surprises. The app makes it really simple. 2 taps, you're done. And with the GameTime guarantee, you know you're getting authenticated tickets on time and the best deal. If you find a better price in the same row and section, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. Plus, the NFL schedule that just got released, and you better believe, look at your calendar, start picking out games you want to hit because they're going to go fast. If you've never used GameTime to grab NFL seats, it's now the time. Seriously, GameTime, it's a game day upgrade. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the GameTime app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Quick reminder, today's episode also brought to you by PrizePicks. Now's the perfect time to join. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. So again, I don't want to get in the mechanics of Poeltl wants an extension. Are they going to give it to him? All this stuff. Leaving out for a moment the how. All what I'm really interested in is the idea of, is a player like Poeltl, who fans may or may not be super familiar with, but is a player like Poeltl good enough that you would say that you would trade Austin Reaves for him? If you had the opportunity to swap those guys on your roster, is he good enough? People don't know why you think. I'll list some of his attributes. Very good defender, competent shot blocker and rim protector. Rim protector, that's the word I'm looking for. Excellent rebounder, sets a brutal screen, which when you play with Luka Doncic is not for nothing. He's actually a sneaky good passer. He's not he's not bad with the ball, shoots a very high efficiency player. He is not an above the rim kind of guy. He's not a lob threat and all that kind of stuff.
He had 9 lob attempts last year. He made 8 of them, but only had right. He is also not anybody who's ever going to stretch the floor. He has taken 7 threes in his career. Right. And I imagine most of them were heaves or something desperation.
Or like Andrew Bynum expanding
his game.
Expanding my game. I'm expanding my game. Greatest quote ever.
Oh man.
It's a pull for the old schools, but still. He ticks a lot of boxes for what can help the Lakers, add a lot of defensive structure. You're adding a lot of rebounding. You are adding some rim protection. He's a smart player. He's a good pick and roll guy in the sense that he does the pick part really well. And it's not that he can't finish at the rim. He's just not a lob threat.
No, he's more of a layup guy or a floater guy. Even, he's not even a huge dunker. Like, that's not something he does a lot. It's really
short jumpers, things like that, elbow jumpers.
It's really more finishing. He shot 63% from the field last year, and 50% of his field goal attempts were from 0 to 3 feet. and he shot almost 75% on those. Like he is somebody that can finish.
Right. I mean, a lot of, he's, again, good rebounder and all that stuff. And he's just
good on the offensive glass too.
But he's also not a guy too, who's, useless off. He's not a 5 to 8 point a night guy. No. He's, averaged 14.5 points a game last year.
I have to know and one part of your premise, because I don't think you can answer the question without talking about the idea that Poeltl wants an extension.
Right.
And the reason I think you can't avoid that piece of it is because he's already almost 30. So if you're going to bring in Jakob Poeltl, and he's making currently 19.5 million upcoming season.
You're looking at probably 30 something, which is, by the way, one of the reasons I find this question and comparison interesting is because he is going to make about, give or take, what you're going to end up needing to pay Reaves.
Well,
maybe a little less, but
I think if you're asking Austin what you're going to be paying,
I don't think, but see, I also don't know if Austin's going to get 42 million. I think
if he could be making 30 mil, that is significantly more per season than a shade under 20.
I think you're right, and I think if you're going to extend Poeltl here, it's not going to be for 19. It's going to be for a lot more than that.
Well, but again, that's why the extension matters at his age. I don't think you can ignore that. There is a lot that he does really well. I think the question with Poeltl is, how much does it matter if many of the things that he does well, I think can benefit a team built around Luka, but does not feel like the prototype center that Luka would want. And I mean, it's something that, first of all, I'm sure the Lakers will do this anyway, but you have to talk with
for sure,
Luka about the idea of, is Poeltl someone you'd be interested in? Poeltl's game doesn't seem like one that would age poorly, in the sense that he's never been a high fly act. He's never relied on athleticism. He's probably going to be roughly the same guy at 33 or 34 that he is at 30.
Possibly slightly a little more injury,
exactly. But
which he's had an issue, he's not been completely healthy throughout his career.
Right. You have to be very, very sold on the stuff that you love from Poeltl, because insofar as what people who've covered Luka describe as the prototype center, and based on the way the Lakers immediately tried to bring in Mark Williams, what it seems like Luka has told them that he likes, Poeltl feels like a very good center who is the opposite of what Luka would choose if he went shopping. So I think that's something you need to think about, especially unless you're willing to give up a fair amount or you can manage to do it without giving up Reaves, but you give up like a first round pick for Poeltl as like a rental, because he can opt out after this coming season. And it's just something that you do to get by. And if it's an expensive rental, if you think it's worth it for one season, so be it. But Poeltl does not feel like the lab designed long-term fit for Luka.
And the other part about it that I think he doesn't, the box that, and it's an important one that he doesn't tick, is the athleticism box. He's not a bad athlete. But he's not a high, like you said, he's not a high flyer. He's not Derek Lively. And the Lakers just generally need to add that to their roster. So, Gafford is a much more, as a comparison, Claxton, both more athletic, classically athletic than Jakob Poeltl. I don't think either one of them is as good, but I think they're both, they are more above the rim kind of guys. It's close. And I think, like, if you could acquire Poeltl for the, sort of Gabe Vincent, Dalton Connect, and pick swap kind of thing or whatever, I'd do that in a heartbeat, because you can't be picky. I don't know if that's going to be enough to do it. I just think
I'd be shocked if it was.
These edge cases are going to be where Rob Pelinka is really going to have to make his money this offseason. Like, all the headlines coming out of Golden State after they lose are they need to get bigger. They need to get more athletic. They want a center. They want a wing. the shopping list that the Lakers have is not going to be particularly different than the shopping lists of a lot of other teams. And as we discussed for Thursday's show, when we took inventory, they don't have a ton of stuff to work with. So, they are likely, I think, going to have to be choosing these sort of imperfect things. It's like Poeltl does like 65% of what they need, but is the other 35% actually more important? Like this is why Pelinka's job only gets harder.
Yeah. I mean, one of the advantages of Nick Claxton, other than, again, if you are trying to work off Luka's shopping list and trying to get his list nailed down as close as possible, is important because you want that commitment from Luka. One of the advantages of someone like Nick Claxton is beyond the fact that he fits better with what everybody seems to think Luka wants. He's already under contract for a few years. So you see how this thing goes. And then when he's like, I think probably 28 or 29 and he's up for a new deal, you figure it out from there. Someone like Daniel Gafford, if they traded for him because he's an expiring after this coming season, or what we just talked about with Poeltl, you have to make more. You have to make more of a long-term commitment immediately to those guys as opposed to someone like Claxton, who you know how long you're committing for. And if none of them feel perfect, someone like Claxton might be the best simply because you know exactly what it is you're getting and for how long.
Right. And then you have to turn it around and be like, okay, let's say of those three guys, I think Claxton is probably the least, the lesserest of those three guys. I mean, I put Gafford in them. I prefer Gafford over Claxton. I think it's probably close. I think it's probably close, but it's my preference. I agree with you that
Poeltl is probably the best overall of the three. I would agree.
Poeltl,
with that.
I think, is a better player overall than both.
I would agree with that.
And then we can argue, I guess, about Claxton. Requires more research as we get into the offseason. I'm not going to lie. I've spent tons of time scouting Nick Claxton. Then you just have to the opposite of it. Like, if you can keep more stuff and get a lesser player, is that a better deal than getting a better player, but that costs you more things? These are the sort of, because if a lot of teams are looking for a center, like, you got to know that the Mavericks are not going to trade Daniel Gafford to LA on the cheap. That is going to come at a premium. If they do it, it's going to come at a premium. And so, which holes do you fill and with what and whatever. But I just thought Poeltl was an interesting, is he kind of at the Reaves level at a position like that? So it
speaks to the importance of
the news of that from Michael Scotto as a potential rumor that he might be on the move kind of got me thinking.
It speaks to the importance just of fit, because talent is obviously incredibly important, but so is fit. And trying to find the best bridge between the two matters.
Yeah. And, if you picked up a center like that, could you compensate by finding more athleticism in other spots? Like, who knows? Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can hang out with over 35,000 subscribers. And of course, we'll be back on Monday. Send us your questions, send us your comments, all those mailbag calls that we put out there, answer them. And we will use your questions on shows coming up next week. Everybody have a great weekend.